Today we're going to be talking all things cervix.
Ooh, I love the cervix.
As do I. In fact, I would say this is one of the areas that there's a lot of mystery, mythical powers that are able to be unleashed, and a lot of this kind of metaphorical talk of what is possible. But today we're going to make it very practical.
There's also misunderstanding.
There's a lot of misunderstanding, misconceptions, and yet at the same time there is a tremendous potential to awaken one's emotional side of their relationship with themselves as well as a partner, tapping into different types of psychological phenomena and memories and feelings that have been there in the past, opening oneself up to tremendous amounts of pleasure that typically are only written about in poetry, psychedelic states, transcendental states to share with partners. There's just so much here to tap into that I just am very excited to talk about probably one of my most favorite parts of the human anatomy.
Cheers. Well, that's pretty cool. I think also I want to dispel some of the myths and the misconceptions right off the bat. If I recall some of the discussions I've had with doctors, and I think you have had the same, is that the cervix isn't really innervated. There should be no sensation. There's debates that there's no such thing as internal orgasms. It's all just clitoris. All of those kinds of things. And what kind of makes me giggle is it's like someone who's blind, who's holding on to the tail of the elephant, and meanwhile you can see the whole elephant. You've touched the trunk and the ear and the leg and the back and also the tail. And the person who's holding the tail that's blind is going, this is the only part of the elephant that actually works and that matters. I'm like, there's a lot more to this than meets the eye, quite literally.
I mean, even to the point that a lot of doctors that will tell me that it's not innervated because they've had work with female clients where they're putting in IUDs to then literally deal with birth control, etc. And then they'll say that it's not innervated, yet the woman's complaining of pain or how painful it is when it gets removed or put in. And I'm like, well, don't you have this with your clients? Yes, they do, but well, there's no but. If they're feeling it, then there's innervation. Or are you saying that there's something in the human body that feels without innervation? Because now we're dealing with a whole other realm that goes way beyond medicine and science, and seems even more crazy for you to be saying that than, oh, actually, maybe it is innervated.
And then for a lot of people, the cervix isn't something you consider as part of the sexual anatomy.
Yes.
The pleasure anatomy. It's just considered, well, that's part of the pregnancy piece, but it's not part of the sexual pleasure piece.
I mean, most people don't go beyond the clitoris, but even the CUV complex, the clitoral urethral vaginal complex, leaves out the cervix and the womb. So when we've had the CUV complex drawn, we've actually included the cervix, even though it is, and I think this is what's truly fascinating, is that the cervix isn't just an anatomical structure. It is the womb. It's a part of the womb. It's literally in Latin, the neck of the womb. So this is an opportunity to actually meet what is very much an internal organ of the utmost sensitivity, utmost intimacy. It's where life is literally conceived. I mean, there's just so much here to unpack.
A lot going on.
Yeah.
So one of the things that is important to realize for some of the ladies who might be watching and going, oh, I don't have my cervix, I'm missing out, still lean into this conversation, because even if you've had a full hysterectomy where they removed everything and removed the cervix and that's been closed up, there's still innervation that can happen. There's still some really amazing things that can happen. So
I've also worked with women that have had hysterectomies, and almost as if it was a phantom limb, having that area stimulated as if it was there, was experienced as it was there, and brought a lot of relief to that area. So this is definitely something for women who have had their womb or just even portions of the cervix removed. And this is also definitely for you men out there.
Yes, and a lot of trauma can also happen with the cervix. So that could happen maybe with a painful intercourse where the cervix is hit with the wrong angle and just really, really hurts, takes your breath away, can leave you feeling bruised. Could be a surgical procedure. I have had a surgical procedure to my cervix where they cut away a big chunk of the cervix. It was on a big camera, and that was so, the whole thing was traumatic. I had to like really reorient myself around that experience. So if you've had that sort of experience, what we're about to talk about is going to support more integration and more healing so that you can open up again. Because a lot of times when this happens is we just shut off that area, and we want to actually activate that area.
So even if you're a guy who has what would be statistically considered population demographic wise a small penis, there are still ways that the cervix will be stimulated by you. If you have a ginormous penis, then you also should be listening, because of how to interact with the cervix is going to be very important.
Yes.
And if you have an average penis, then you should also, because there is a certain connection that happens there, and understanding that needs to be both on the physical side, but also the emotional, bonding, energetic, psychological side of what your partner goes through when being touched at such a deep, intimate place.
I would say also if you're using a strap-on, because you will need to develop a type of sensitivity when you engage with this part of the anatomy, so that actually you allow it to bloom completely, and have incredible, beautiful sensations instead of the retracting sensation. So let's just for a second go into the difficult aspects, and then we'll go into the beauty and what is possible. But the difficult aspects, one example of this would be that you have seen a lot of, is that the cervix, there's so much pelvic tension, it's almost kind of like tucked away, and this causes a lot of, for those who are menstruating, really intense menstrual issues and menstrual pain. Could you speak just a tiny bit to that piece?
Well, I mean, first of all, there is just the way that we carry ourselves through everyday life. How we are sitting, the way that we, like women wearing high heels, the different types of like Pilates and tension-based exercises, the advocacy
dance, yoga, martial arts, they all have you like really hold in.
Yoga. Then also too, the way that Kegels are being taught is just the squeezing, the way women are being taught to bring more pleasure and sensation to themselves, all this idea of tightening, having to look a certain way where our bellies are tucked in, and then even the medical definition of orgasm, that the cervix retracts up and away from the entrance so as not to be battered by the penis and to create a sperm receptacle. And this is pretty much a direct quote out of Sherry Winston's book, The Anatomy of Pleasure. This conceptualization of how the cervix operates, well, guess what? The cervix has a tendency to just stay up and slightly, as opposed to like kind of tilted forward or down, but like almost backwards, that I've noticed a lot, kind of up and into the body, permanently in that position. And I've noticed as well that that has a lot to do with women that have problems with pelvic floor tension, that tend to experience more pain during their periods, because the ability for that cervix to lower and raise naturally throughout the course of their cycle over a month period of time, or however long each individual person's cycle is inhibited. The same way if your legs had only a particular range of motion that was less than what you were used to for walking. Walking's going to feel awkward then.
I wanted to mention something that was such a discovery for me in my journey, as I worked with an osteo who did internal adjustments, because I had this one little pinprick pain that I just couldn't clear with no matter how much practice and breath and touch I was doing. So she went in intravaginally and was able to adjust a ligament. Now I want to explain this because it was such a cool thing, is to recognize that the uterus is suspended and it has different ligaments that hold it, and it allows for all this diversity of movement. You can, through your outer belly, make contact with the uterus and shift it side to side. So that's super interesting to me. With the inhale push breath that you teach with the sex method, that inhale push, really allowing like this greater movement movement of the uterus and the cervix into and of the vagina. Now, what was super interesting about all of that is the mobility of it, and then how it gets frozen. And it's the freezing or the tightening of one ligament over another, and overstretching of one that can really cause a lot of issues. I didn't even know that, because you kind of, when you look at an anatomy picture of the whole structure, you just think it's a stationary thing and that's it.
Yes.
But actually, it's very, it has to be, because when it's expanding to hold a child, it needs a lot of that fluidity and ability to expand. The other thing that I thought was really interesting is years ago when I met one of my friends who is a general practitioner doctor, and I hadn't had a pelvic exam in a long time, and I asked if she'd be willing to give me one. It was one of our first times interacting. She said, sure. So, but then I said, please, no one's ever told me where is specifically my ovary? Could you tell me when you make contact with it? Can you tell me when you're touching my cervix? Can you? Yeah. So it was a really cool self-anatomy lesson as she was doing the pelvic exam. Now I'm touching this part. Can you feel that? Yeah. Can you feel this? Yes. It was super cool. But what she shared with me in that session, which is what I find super intriguing, which I want to unpack with you, she said over her entire career of doing pelvic exams, because she's a person who really is pro-female orgasm and pleasure, she had noticed, so if you can imagine, this is the vaginal canal, this is the cervix mouth, and then this is the neck of the cervix. She said with women where the cervix had a longer neck, they were way more orgasmic than women who had a short neck. Now, that was interesting information then, but meeting you and also meeting some pelvic pain people and osteos after that, what I recognize is maybe the ones who had the short neck, it was a stationary kind of locked in place, not a lot of breath happening. And those with the longer neck had this mobility and this ability to actually move things around internally. So this is my speculation based on personal experience and feedback from having multiple pelvic exams from very different types of professionals. But I thought I'd ask you what you think of that. Is it possible that the cervix can come down and move up? Is that what you've noticed?
I mean, the cervix has a particular length to it, just the same way that every anatomical structure has a range within the human population that can be longer, thicker, wider, etc. And it's not just the length that varies on the cervix, there's also the diameter of it. Yeah. Certain cervixes, especially
if they've had birth
or not, the ability to dilate and open is easier than others. I mean, some of them do have these very longer necks that almost, they kind of flower out like this, versus other ones which are much more round and closed. And
I imagine it also depends the different times of the month.
And then also the different times of the month. But I don't know, because I wasn't feeling through her fingers, because I don't think what you're going to notice is that neck of the uterus is going to lengthen or shorten based off of where it's at. But however, that being said, it will come much more forward, and to a finger that maybe hasn't looked at it to that extent, or from the perspective of that it's engorging and getting arousal, it might feel, well, this cervix here is just a longer one, whereas actually what they were feeling was that it's comes further down towards the entrance. So it's a little bit hard for me to say.
Yes.
But
you have noticed some mobility.
Oh, not just some. I mean, tremendous amounts of mobility, to the point that there's no way that you are touching.
Because people say it's really hard to find their cervix.
Say it's very hard to find, and I mean, the length of my middle finger would be shorter than a micropenis, and when I'm first working intravaginally, there is no contacting the cervix, no matter what position they're in.
It's kind of like hidden and tucked away.
Completely. But then at some point during the session, I don't even need to bring my whole finger in, and the cervix is not just coming down to meet it, but actually has dilated, latched on, and then is bringing it in, and not into the womb, because there are different sphincters. There's the ios and the external and the internal os, and so the external os will dilate, but the internal, the ios, will not open. It opens from pressure from the back, such as the baby. Yep. And so a lot of doctors are like, oh my gosh, but why would you ever do that? In fact, we had a a luminary gynecologist go through, and the first conversation with me is like, why would you stimulate the cervix? And that just sounds...
It's so painful.
That sounds painful and uncomfortable and even like kind of dangerous, in terms of infections and everything else. And then years later, having a session with me, she was like, I've read about these things and
it's so lovely.
had no clue that it could actually feel that way. And then just the amount of sensation and feeling that returned to the body was absolutely tremendous.
Well, I think what's really fascinating about this, because I think a lot of people, the only time you really hear about the cervix where you make contact is prolapse. And so a lot of people are nervous about, oh my God, I feel it, it's prolapse, there's something bad, it's gonna fall out, I need to go get surgery, I need intervention. So what is the difference between prolapse and then actual choosing, when it's up and when it's down? If we could just unpack that mystery.
I mean, I guess the closest way I could put it into it is if you have overexerted a muscle, or that the muscle has no animation to it, meaning that it can no longer be controlled, and so it just falls down into this relaxed place, versus you actually have good pelvic floor tone, which means you can raise and lower it through the full length of motion. And a lot of times how prolapse can happen is that there's been so much tension of holding it that then those muscles atrophy, or that an injury happens, or that they just get exhausted, and then they just go into complete inability to actually pull up. And so then everything with gravity just falls down and out.
So the proper breath isn't only inhaling and allowing the movement down, but also allowing a movement up.
Yes,
so that would be
and you can definitely pull
full
up
spectrum,
full
of the
spectrum,
breath.
And then even being able to learn how to do it with an inhale versus an exhale,
and also not with a
different
ton of
varieties.
tension. This is what people don't understand.
Well, the most basic part is that you literally are just breathing in, and it lowers on its own, and then as you exhale, it should raise back up
Don't need to force
to
it.
its own neutral
It's
state.
what I've actually noticed. So with vaginal weightlifting, for example, the advanced jade egg work, so what you do is you have the egg inside, you have a string, it's attached to something. I usually would use water bottles and water, because then you can really incrementally increase.
Yes.
So you have a lot of control. And then you hold at the base of the bottle, you're holding kind of the longest place that it would be before falling out.
Yes.
And then you leave that hand there, and then as you draw the uterus up, the bottle lifts right up off the hand.
Incredible.
And then it can come back and touch. And you can see this incredible amount, or a huge range of movement.
Yes.
Just from, this is not tough breathing, it's just a very gentle lifting, relaxing, but not letting go completely.
Yes.
So that kind of practice, when it's done really well, and again, it's more done relaxed. It's not done as clenching and stress. That's really not good for that area.
It's not like a bodybuilder doing a max rep on the bench press.
Correct. So, but what I'm fascinated by, because you just don't hear this ever in pelvic exams, you don't hear about it in reproductive sexual anatomy, you don't hear about it really, and very few people talk about the cervix actively engaging. The only time you hear about that is at the moment where there's ejaculate and there's a drinking kind of movement that's depicted.
I think the typical term that was used by academics in the past was upsuck, and that's also been, some academics now debate that, whether that's true or not, but yeah, upsucking is it.
But when you work intravaginally and you have women really focus on their breath, and then you notice different from maybe the most clinical version of that to then high states of pleasure versions of that. What have you noticed in terms of the cervix's own intelligence of responsiveness to movement and breath?
Treating it as its own individual just body part on its own, there's not too much that goes on. But once there has been contact and then going, I think I feel a little something, and then as they start to breathe and bring mobility to it, bring their full body motion to it, bring their whatever emotions typically are there, which sometimes can be at first sadness, sometimes it's birth memories, sometimes it's just tension, a lot of times it's just numbness, sometimes it's even a bit of like apathy. But once those emotions start to sort of move through, and then there's sensations of warmth that come online, there's even sensations of like a deep sense of falling in love with one's self. There are...
Well, I think you've said that a lot of clients experience for the first time a heart opening, almost, if it's not an orgasm, then intense pleasure.
It's like this area opens up, there's warmth that spreads. If there's been sort of emotional blocks, it can almost feel like scar tissues being removed, which can be a very intense sensation. If there's sort of this anxious state of needing to have a lover, that's actually being met within themselves. And so just that whole transformative process on the psycho-emotional aspect that's tied to the physical stimulation of this area. But then in terms of sensation too, going from being able to feel pressure to being able to feel heat to then even feeling like a buzzing, almost moving into an electrical type of state is something that's continually mentioned. And then also too, one of the ones I think is most interesting is that the whole world, the room, everything is as if the brightness has been turned up.
Well, that's that trance-like state that starts to happen, which I think if we studied this really quite properly and we were able to get proper funding and really look at full innervation of this deeper part of the female anatomy, we would recognize that the pleasure pathways of the hypogastric nerve, the intercostal nerves, the vagus nerve, there's a lot of information being shared through this part of the body, not just through the spinal signaling. So I think that there's a lot that's uncharted and misunderstood. Before we go into explicit, because I'm really excited to do this, the explicit aspect where I really want to share some deep personal experiences, and I know you have some great client stories and lover stories. I want to just share for a second that when a woman sometimes decides, okay, what's in there? Because most of us women, we're not that encouraged to put fingers inside. We're scared of putting fingers inside. You can see that also in a culture that sometimes has nails out to here. I'm always asking Aaron, how do they masturbate? Because I like a lot of internal touch. And so if we've never had any experience of even remotely coming in, it's a lot. There's so many different types of tissue. So I remember once a client saying, I went to the ER, and I'm like, why? And she's like, I felt a lump in my vagina. I thought it was cancer. And I was like, what? And it was her cervix.
Yes.
So it's really important part of the empowerment part of your sexual sovereignty to be able to physically, through your own touch, go into your own body and map out these structures. And if you are someone who loves someone with a vulva, to do so as well with a lot of love and care and respect and slowness, and just feel around. There's so many different textures and structures, and as they engorge, they change. And being able to map that out sensorially, like through what the fingers are picking up, and then interoceptively through what the actual structures themselves are sensing, is priceless. So I'm very excited to discuss more how to do that on the explicit side. And if you don't know that we have an explicit side, now you do. And it's a paid wall just to keep things from getting shut down and edited by the different platforms. So if you want to hear more about that, then embodiedlove.love is where you can upgrade. Is there anything, final thoughts for this part of the podcast that you want to share?
One of the things about the cervix is that it's sort of like a rainbow. If you chase after it, it will sort of run away from you.
Orgasm too. Yeah.
Precisely. However, learning to work with, especially as a woman, your own body, so that way then your body is the one that's bringing it down and choosing to bring it down, and learning the specific biomechanics of how to use your breath with your pelvic floor, with your hip tilt, with your different tones of voice are all going to help to bring a very different experience than you may have had. And I just state this as an encouragement. That way then, if you've ever had really negative experiences, or you've just had a neutral experience, or even just want to like optimize your experience, that you take that perspective of it. And also anyone that you might work with professionally also would be bringing that perspective. And for you guys who think it's, it's all about me, or, I need to be a certain length, or I'm the one doing everything. It's really how much can you invite the other person into it. And the key, even though it sounds weird and a bit out there, is how much feeling of love that you can bring to this part of the body. And this has a massive point of, once you've connected it, as you've connected with it, if you do not respect yourself enough or someone else enough to actually love them, which is different than being in love, but to touch with that almost agape, unconditional love, then this is the place that you do not go.
Yeah.
But if you have that and you can meet yourself that way, and sometimes by interacting with it, that begins to emerge.
Yes.
So it's just a very important part that often gets overlooked, is the importance of something that you teach, that heart-genital connection.
There's so much to unpack there, so we'll jump in a second, but I just want to give the public space listeners just an understanding that the deeper pelvic nerves, when you stimulate those, when that part gets contacted, say in what you're saying, that reverent way or relaxed arousal way, where things can open up, because a lot of times we keep that area closed, but when that can open up, it can be deeply emotional. There's a lot of, and it's not emotional in the sense that something's wrong. It's just like emotive energy that starts to move through. And that is a signal that you've actually activated the deeper pelvic nerves. So that's super exciting.
And some of the great effects that you can look forward to are pleasureful periods, as much as that sounds out there. Then look at it as a pain-free period.
Yes.
Or also you'll walk differently. Your gait, the swing of your hips, and how you move through life emotionally. And some of the really interesting things that I've noticed have been clients who've always had a tendency to choose a very particular type of partner that they're not wanting to interact with anymore, that as they create this shift and work with this part of their body, they just put out a very different vibe and attract a very different vibe, and find themselves attracted to a different type of partner, and different types of partners who they normally wouldn't have found them interesting all of a sudden do start to find them interesting.
And then the last piece I want to say before we jump over is the ability to understand that you can bring that cervix forward, you can move and breathe with it. If you look at it from the Taoist perspective of sexual reflexology, it's the capacity to be willing to open that front body and to make your heart available in a sexual experience, and to actually bring that part of yourself into it. So it may not be for everyone, but when you're ready for that experience, it will bring you into a whole new erotic landscape.
When you say opening the front body, it's literally the difference between this
and stretching
and
open.
Naturally feeling open.
Yes.
And moving through the world. Does this feel good?
Yeah.
No, that's when you know the front body's open.
Awesome. Well, let's switch over. To join us for the complete and explicit version of this podcast, just simply upgrade your membership and you'll get instant access.